The city of New York had many dining rooms, but none like the Everly Room. Nestled at the heart of Manhattan, its velvet curtains and glittering chandeliers whispered of secrets only the wealthy could afford. The restaurant was not simply a place to eat. It was a theater where fortunes performed themselves. On this autumn evening, the air inside was rich with the hum of conversation and the quiet clink of crystal glasses. Waiters in black aprons moved in practiced rhythm, weaving between tables with trays balanced like fragile promises. At the center of it all, like a king on his throne, sat Victor Harrington. Victor was more than wealthy. He was wealth incarnate. Silver hair combed to perfection, cufflinks carved from rare gemstones, his presence bent the room around him. Every head seemed to tilt slightly in his direction, as if afraid to miss the smallest gesture. He had built an empire on ruthless ambition, and he carried himself with the cold elegance of a man who believed himself untouchable. But across the dining floor, a pair of eyes did not lower in reverence. Emily Carter, tray in hand, stood near the bar, waiting for her cue to move. She was young, mid-20s, but there was a maturity in her posture, a stillness in her expression. The crisp shirt and apron marked her as just another waitress, yet there was something in her gaze that hinted at depths unseen. Her colleagues whispered that she was too educated for this work, too proud to be here. They weren't wrong, but Bills did not care for pride, and life had left her with few choices. Still, she carried herself with dignity. Even as whispers about Harrington's cruelty circled the staff, Emily resolved to do her job well. Tonight, fate had other plans. The moment began with a glass of red wine. Victor, lounging in his prime seat, inspected the vintage placed before him, a rare Chateau Lafite Rothschild. He lifted the glass, swirled it, and with deliberate contempt, spilled a few drops onto the spotless white linen. "Unacceptable," he said, his voice sharp enough to slice through the room's hum. The maitre d' rushed forward, bowing in apology. Guests craned their necks, whispering. Harrington loved this humiliation disguised as critique. His cold eyes scanned the staff until they landed on Emily. She hadn't poured the wine, but she was close, and that was enough. "You," he commanded, "come here." Every step Emily took toward his table echoed like a drumbeat. She could feel dozens of eyes tracking her. Harrington's smirk widened. He could already taste the fear he expected her to show. He held out the glass. "Taste it." Emily froze. "Sir, it's against policy for servers to—" "Policy?" Harrington's laugh thundered. "Do you know who I am? I don't follow policy. I am policy. Drink. Drink." A ripple of amusement spread across nearby tables. The wealthy loved this theater of cruelty. To see a server bent and humiliated was entertainment. But Emily's hands did not shake. Her pulse quickened, yet her eyes held steady. In her mind, she saw another face, her father's, tired, betrayed, and broken by the very man sneering at her now. She could have obeyed. She could have sipped the wine, swallowed her pride, and faded into the background. But years of silence pressed against her lips, demanding release. 7 words slipped out, quiet yet thunderous. "You're the reason my father is dead." The Everly Room erupted. Gasps broke the air. A fork clattered to the floor. Someone half choked on champagne. Victor Harrington sat frozen. The practiced mask of superiority cracked for the first time anyone could remember. "What did you say?" His voice was low, dangerous. Emily did not blink. "You heard me." Cameras clicked. A phone recorded. Whispers swirled like wildfire. The maitre d', trembling, rushed forward. "Emily, apologize." "At once." But Emily stood taller, her tray balanced firmly at her side. "I will not apologize for the truth." The wealthy patrons shifted uncomfortably. Some smirked, others frowned, but all felt it. The air of a throne room suddenly turned battlefield. Victor's fingers tightened around the glass. His empire had been challenged before, but never like this, not by a girl in a server's uniform. And as Emily's words spread through the room, captured on phones and whispered across tables, something irreversible began. It was no longer just a dinner service. It was the beginning of a war. For a moment, the Everly Room ceased to breathe. Emily's words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore, impossible to clear. The chandeliers still glowed. The violins in the corner still played their gentle tune, but the soul of the restaurant had frozen. Every eye was locked on the young waitress who had just dared to challenge a king. Victor Harrington's lips parted, though no words came. It was as though the language he had mastered, the sharp retorts, the mocking laughter had abandoned him. For decades, no one had spoken to him with such defiance. and certainly not a waitress. The silence broke with a wave of whispers. Did she say? Her father, dead. Is she accusing Harrington of? He was not to the wreck as well. The maitre d', pale and sweating, tried to diffuse the storm. Ladies and gentlemen, please. A misunderstanding. Miss Carter is clearly... But Emily did not waver. Her heart pounded, but her spine remained straight, her eyes locked with Victor's. She had spoken the truth, and there would be no retreat. Victor found his voice at last, low and venomous. Repeat that. You heard me, Emily replied. Her words were calm, but the tremor in her chest was undeniable. The murmurs spread. Across the room, smartphones tilted upward, recording every second. A hedge fund manager whispered to his wife, who immediately texted a friend. A socialite at the bar uploaded a video to her Instagram story. Waitress just accused Harrington of murder. Within minutes, the digital world began to stir. Clips of Emily's accusation, shaky but clear, circulated on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. Hashtags formed faster than fire in dry grass. Number 7 words. Number waitress vs billionaire. Number Harrington exposed. For the wealthy still seated in the restaurant, the confrontation was scandal. For the world outside, it was spectacle. The collapse of the dinner. Victor's face darkened. Rage pulsed beneath the surface of his carefully maintained composure. He leaned forward, his voice sharp as broken glass. You've made a very grave mistake. Emily lifted her chin. The mistake was thinking no one would ever say it out loud. The gasp that followed was louder than the music. The maitre d' practically begged her now, whispering urgently, Emily, stop. Please. You'll lose everything. I already lost everything, she whispered back, though not softly enough. The words carried just far enough for Victor to hear. His eyes narrowed. He slammed the glass of wine onto the table so hard that crimson droplets splattered across the white linen. Guests flinched. Somewhere, a woman muttered, he's guilty. Look at him. Emily's tray was still in her hand, but in that moment it felt more like a shield. She wasn't sure if she could hold his gaze forever, but she had done it long enough. The point had been made. Victor rose abruptly, his chair scraping against marble. Get her out of my sight. Security appeared at once, but not fast enough to stop the dozens of phones recording his every move. The sight of a billionaire snapping, calling for a young waitress to be dragged out, only poured gasoline on the fire already spreading across the internet. The walk of defiance. Emily was escorted out, but she did not let them see her fear. Her steps were steady, her shoulders square. Every camera caught the same image. A young woman in a server's uniform walking with dignity, even as power tried to silence her. Behind her, Victor barked orders, his fury echoing through the restaurant. But the damage was done. As Emily pushed through the heavy doors into the cool Manhattan night, she felt her chest tighten with both terror and relief. She had spoken the words she had carried for years. She had lit the match, and the fire had already begun. The internet reacts. By dawn, the clip had millions of views. Comment sections exploded with speculation. Who is Emily Carter? Her father, who was he? Did Harrington kill someone? And what is the bath to my provesting my souls with a long of the wrong story? Theories abounded. Amateur detectives scoured old articles. Names floated to the surface. One name stuck, Daniel Carter. 10 years ago, he had been a rising star in the tech industry. Brilliant, innovative, respected. And then, suddenly, he had vanished from the headlines. His company, Carter Innovations, had been swallowed by rivals, his fortune gone, his death reported quietly as a heart attack. Until now, few remembered. But Emily Carter's accusation had cracked open the tomb of memory, and people began to dig. Victor's fury. In the penthouse suite of his skyscraper, Victor Harrington hurled a crystal decanter against the wall. It shattered, whiskey bleeding into the carpet. She humiliated me, he spat. A girl in an apron humiliated me. His advisor tried to calm him. We'll spin it, sir. Say she's unstable. Fire her quietly. No one will believe a waitress over you. But Victor was not convinced. For the first time in years, he felt something foreign. Not anger, he was accustomed to anger. Not annoyance, he lived with it daily. No, what pulsed beneath his fury was fear. Because in Emily's eyes, he had seen recognition. She wasn't just speaking recklessly. She knew. Emily alone. Meanwhile, Emily sat in her small apartment, the weight of the night pressing on her. She replayed her words in her mind. You're the reason my father is dead. Had she gone too far? Was she prepared for what would come? Her phone buzzed endlessly, calls from unknown numbers, journalists requesting interviews, strangers offering both praise and threats. She silenced it and sat in the quiet, staring at a faded photograph of her father. "You told me to always speak the truth," she whispered to the picture. "Well, I finally did." The city outside roared with life, oblivious to the storm she had unleashed. But Emily knew this was only the beginning. Morning sunlight cut across Manhattan, glinting off glass towers, but for once, it was not the markets or mergers that dominated the city's chatter. It was a waitress. News anchors leaned toward their cameras with hungry eyes. Screens behind them replayed the same grainy clip. Emily Carter, tray in hand, telling one of the most powerful men in America, "You're the reason my father is dead." The phrase looped like a chant. 7 words, raw and unpolished, yet they carried the weight of dynamite. The media storm. By noon, every major network had picked up the story. The New York Times, waitress accuses billionaire of murder. CNN, 7 words that could end a fortune. Fox Business, scandal or slander. Harrington faces explosive allegation. Talk shows debated it endlessly. Some commentators dismissed Emily as an attention seeker. Others praised her courage. But whether believers or skeptics, all agreed. The accusation had teeth. Journalists scrambled to piece together her life. Who was Emily Carter? Why had she targeted Harrington? Within days, her background began to surface. Daughter of Daniel Carter, the once promising entrepreneur who had vanished under mysterious circumstances a decade earlier. The puzzle pieces clicked. The story was no longer about a waitress. It was about bloodlines, betrayal, and the possibility that one man's empire had been built on another man's grave. Victor's counterstrike. Victor Harrington had weathered storms before. Competitors, regulators, scandals, he had buried them all. But this was different. This was personal. In the gleaming office of his skyscraper, surrounded by a phalanx of lawyers, he launched his first counterattack, a lawsuit. Harrington Enterprises versus Emily Carter. The claim? Defamation. Damages sought, $50 million, enough to crush her spirit, drown her in paperwork, and remind the world that he still had teeth. His lawyers smirked as they filed the papers. "She'll cave before it goes anywhere," one assured him. "She's a waitress. She can't fight this." Victor nodded, though a flicker of unease remained. The viral clip had reached too far, too fast, and in Emily's eyes, there had been no fear. Emily in the spotlight. When Emily's lawyer slid the papers across the table, her breath caught. $50 million. The number seemed absurd, almost laughable. She barely scraped together rent each month. How could she possibly fight this? Her lawyer, Thomas Reed, spoke carefully. "It's intimidation. They don't expect you to pay. They expect you to fold. And last, fees. However, great apps of ones of inting for. And ones it deleted like that." Emily closed her eyes, steadying herself. She had expected retaliation, but seeing it in black ink made her stomach twist. Still, something deeper than fear stirred inside her. A resolve. "If I back down," she whispered, "then everything my father endured stays buried. I can't let that happen." The public divides. As the lawsuit hit headlines, the public split. Some scoffed. "She's lying. Just after money." Others rallied. "She's brave." One voice against billions. Hashtags surged again. Number justice for Carter. Number billionaire vs waitress. Number stand with Emily. Crowdfunding campaigns sprang up overnight. Within days, Emily's legal defense fund swelled with donations from strangers. She scrolled through the comments late at night. "For my dad who lost everything to a corporate shark. Don't give up, Emily, we believe you." Each message lifted her, reminding her she wasn't as alone as she felt. The shadows of the past. Journalists dug deeper into Daniel Carter's history. They found fragments, glowing articles from the early 2000s praising his innovations, mentions of his promising startup, then a sudden disappearance from the business pages. Old associates, emboldened by Emily's courage, began to whisper. They recalled late-night meetings, deals that turned sour, rumors of sabotage, and always in the background, the shadow of Harrington. One name surfaced repeatedly: Carter Innovations. Once hailed as a competitor that could rival Harrington Enterprises, it had collapsed almost overnight. Patents reassigned, partnerships dissolved, employees scattered. Was it coincidence or conspiracy? The questions only deepened the mystery and tightened the noose around Victor's neck. The weight of fame. Emily never asked to be famous, yet in days she had become a symbol. Cameras followed her when she left her apartment. Strangers stopped her on the street. Some offered hugs. Others hissed insults. Her phone buzzed with interview requests. Some she declined. Others she accepted, speaking softly but firmly on national television. I didn't accuse Victor Harrington for attention. I did it because the truth has been buried for too long. My father was destroyed, and I refused to stay silent. Her calm conviction only fueled the fire. Clips of her interviews spread as quickly as the confrontation itself. But fame came with a price. Threatening emails filled her inbox. A brick shattered her window one night. The police offered little more than a shrug. Harrington's influence was vast, and fear had long been his greatest weapon. Victor's reflection. In the solitude of his penthouse, Victor stared at the city skyline. Once, it had bowed to him. Now, it seemed to whisper of betrayal. He poured another drink, though it did nothing to steady his nerves. The waitress's face haunted him. Her father's ghost lingered. For the first time in decades, Victor Harrington wondered if the empire he had built on lies could truly survive the truth. And so the lines were drawn. A billionaire, armed with wealth, power, and lawyers, and a waitress with nothing but the truth, her courage, and a swelling tide of public support. The world watched. The battle had only begun. Power rarely yields without venom. For Victor Harrington, the courtroom was only the opening skirmish. If Emily Carter thought the battle would remain in legal filings and polite arguments, she was mistaken. Victor had built his empire not only on business acumen, but on fear and narrative. He knew how to bury a truth, how to twist perception, how to stain a name until even the innocent appeared guilty. And so began the smear campaign. The first headlines. It started small, tucked in the corners of tabloids. Waitress with a dark past? Who is Emily Carter, really? But soon the stories spread. Former classmates were tracked down, bribed for comments. A neighbor described her as aloof. A co-worker claimed she had a temper. Old photographs were dredged up, stripped of context but painted as evidence of recklessness. One article suggested she had been fired from a previous job for dishonesty. Another insinuated drug use, citing unnamed sources. The truth didn't matter. Doubt did. Emily under siege. Emily scrolled through the headlines in her small apartment, her stomach tightening with every lie. Waitress with troubled history. History. Seeking attention? Carter plays the victim. Ex-friends speak out. She was always dramatic. As we one have won. She slammed her laptop shut, her hands shaking. For years, she had lived quietly, working hard, asking for nothing. And now the world knew her name only through distortions. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Some messages offered support. Others spat cruelty. Liar. Gold digger. You'll get what's coming. The weight of it pressed on her chest until she could hardly breathe. A lonely night. One evening, Emily stood before her bathroom mirror, her reflection pale and tired. What if they're right? She whispered. What if I'm just being foolish? Have the sipe as the fast of the pains past as the beating of the breasted, the sipe as the pains the mast of the pains past of the tans. But then her gaze fell on a photograph taped to the mirror, her father, Daniel Carter, smiling in the sun, a man of integrity and vision. They tried to erase you, she murmured to his image. I won't let them erase me too. The doubt receded, not gone, but pushed back by resolve. The public fights back. Victor underestimated one thing. The internet had already chosen its hero. While his media machine churned out hit pieces, thousands of ordinary people defended Emily. Hashtags like #StandWithEmily and #TruthMatters trended daily. Independent bloggers dissected the smear articles, exposing their falsehoods. Memes mocked Harrington's desperation. Crowdfunding continued to swell. With every attack, Emily's supporters grew louder. What Victor intended as a silencing campaign only fanned the flames. Victor's fury. In his penthouse, Victor hurled the morning paper across the room. The headline screamed, Harrington's attacks backfire, public rallies around waitress. Idiots, he bellowed. Do they not see she's nothing? Nothing. His chief of staff, calm despite the tirade, replied, They see what they want to see, and right now, she's the underdog. People love underdogs. Victor's eyes narrowed. Then we make her more than an underdog. We make her dangerous. Was not without some pressing. We should decide. The Whisper Network. Within days, new rumors surfaced. Claims that Emily was unstable, even violent. Anonymous voices whispered that she was obsessed with revenge, that she had staged the confrontation for fame. A late-night talk show host joked, Maybe she's just looking for a book deal. Laughter followed, but the seed had been planted. Emily watched the segment alone, her fists clenched. The humiliation cut deeper than Harrington's wineglass ever had. But she remembered her father's words, "When the truth is fragile, guard it with courage." Having not admire the sea that the weather filler sees. The journalist's visit. Clara Monroe, the investigative journalist who had begun digging into Harrington's empire, knocked on Emily's door one evening. She carried a folder, thick with documents. "They're trying to bury you," Clara said without preamble. "But I think I've found proof of how your father's company was stolen." Emily's breath caught. She opened the folder. Inside were contracts, emails, and memos, evidence of Harrington's hand guiding the downfall of Carter Innovations. "Why are you helping me?" Emily asked softly. Clara's eyes hardened. "Because truth matters, and because men like Victor Harrington have walked unchecked for too long. Have to is not a reproof." He said of Manser of Line. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt the weight lift. She wasn't alone anymore. Victor plots in the dark. Meanwhile, Harrington brooded. His legal maneuvers had not silenced her. His smear campaign had backfired. The waitress, instead of crumbling, was becoming a symbol. Symbols, Victor knew, were dangerous. They inspired, they rallied, and they were far harder to kill than reputations. He poured another drink, staring at the glittering skyline. "If I can't destroy her image," he muttered, "then I'll destroy her." It was not bluster. It was a promise. The smear campaign had failed to silence Emily Carter. Instead, it hardened her resolve and armed her with allies. But in Victor's fury, a darker storm gathered, one that would trade whispers for threats and rumors for danger. The real war was only beginning. Victor Harrington had learned one brutal lesson over decades in business. If money and narrative failed, fear would not. The smear campaign had not broken Emily Carter. If anything, it had made her stronger. Crowds chanted her name, strangers donated to her cause, and journalists dug deeper into the skeletons rattling in Harrington's gilded closet. So Victor sharpened a different blade, the black car. It began with a shadow. One night, as Emily left Clara Monroe's office, the city streets unusually quiet, she noticed a sleek black car idling across the road. Its windows were tinted, its engine humming low. She walked faster. The car rolled forward, matching her pace. At the corner, she ducked into a bodega, pretending to browse the shelves. When she emerged, the car was gone. Her breath shivered in her chest. Coincidence? Or a message? The anonymous calls. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice crackled through. "Accidents happen, Miss Carter. Careful on your way to work." Click. Her hands shook. She called the police, but they dismissed it. "Could be a prank," the officer said flatly. "Keep your doors locked." But the calls continued. Different times, same message. Each one chipped away at her peace. The offer. One evening, a man in a tailored suit appeared at her apartment door. He introduced himself as a friend of Mr. Harrington. On her kitchen table, he placed a slim briefcase. He opened it with a click. Stacks of $100 bills gleamed under the dim light. "2 million, he said simply. "Walk away. Drop your claims. Start a new life somewhere else." Emily stared at the money, her heart pounding. She thought of her overdue bills, the sleepless nights, the fear gnawing at her. For a fleeting second, she imagined freedom, but then she saw her father's face in her memory. Daniel Carter, weary yet proud, a man destroyed by greed, but unbroken in principle. She snapped the briefcase shut. "Tell Victor," she said, voice steady, "my father's life wasn't for sale. Neither is mine." The man's eyes flickered with something between respect and annoyance. He left without another word. Emily breaks down. When the door closed, Emily collapsed into a chair. Her body trembled, tears welling unbidden. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't fearless. She was just a daughter who wanted the truth. But fear pressed against her ribs like a vice. The black car, the calls, the briefcase, it was too much. She buried her face in her hands. "Dad, I don't know if I can do this." The room was silent. But deep within her, a whisper rose. Not her father's voice, but her own. "You already started. You can't stop now." Clara's support. The next day, Clara Monroe stormed into Emily's apartment, holding a folder. She took one look at Emily's swollen eyes and sat beside her. "They're trying to break you," Clara said. "That means they're scared." Emily's voice cracked. "I don't know if I can take it." To the 30 the faces that was late, he quite do have a post to naughty. He saved life. Clara squeezed her hand. Then let me help you carry it. From the folder, Clara pulled out new evidence, internal documents leaked from within Harrington Enterprises. Fraud, bribes, illegal partnerships. Each page was another crack in Victor's empire. Emily wiped her eyes. For the first time in days, hope stirred. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. Victor in the shadows. Meanwhile, Victor paced his penthouse, glass in hand. Reports of Emily's resilience infuriated him. She had refused the money. She had refused the fear. Why won't she break? He snarled. His advisor shifted uneasily. Because she doesn't want money or power. She wants justice. That's harder to kill. Victor's glass shattered in his fist. Then we stop aiming for justice. We aim for her. The room went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The near miss. A week later, Emily left Clara's office late. The rain-slick streets reflected neon lights, the air heavy with mist. Halfway across the road, headlights roared toward her. A black SUV, speeding, its beams blinding. Time slowed. Her instinct screamed. She leapt sideways, crashing onto the wet pavement. The SUV skimmed past, its tires hissing, then vanished into the night. People rushed to her aid, their shouts echoing in the rain. But Emily knew. This wasn't random. This was Harrington's warning carved in steel and rubber. She stood shakily, drenched and bruised, but alive. The fire ignites. The news exploded. Emily Carter, targeted in hit and run. If Victor had hoped to silence her, he had miscalculated. Public opinion surged. Sympathy turned to outrage. Strangers flooded the streets with signs. Justice for Carter. Commentators asked the obvious question. If Harrington is innocent, why silence her this way? Emily, arm in a sling, stood before cameras days later. Her voice was firm despite the pain. They tried to scare me. They tried to buy me. They tried to run me down. But I am still here, and I will not stop. The crowd roared, and Victor Harrington, watching from his tower, felt something new. Not just anger, not just fear, but the creeping edge of inevitability. Victor Harrington had always believed his empire was unshakable. Steel, glass, and money foundations stronger than any storm. For decades, he had silenced competitors, bent politicians, and crushed dissent. But empires do not fall in silence. They fall with noise. And now, the noise was deafening. The boardroom mutiny. The boardroom of Harrington Enterprises had once been Victor's kingdom. Executives sat in polished chairs, nodding obediently, their careers tethered to his moods. But today, the air was different, tense, uneasy. A shareholder cleared his throat. Mr. Harrington, with respect, the scandal is hurting us. Stocks are down 20% this quarter. Clients are pulling contracts. Regulators are circling. Victor's jaw tightened. It's a smear. Lies from a waitress. It will blow over. Another voice spoke, sharper. It hasn't blown over. It's getting worse. And now with this so-called hit and run, the world believes you tried to kill her. The words cut like blades. Whispers rippled across the table. Victor slammed his fist down, rattling glasses of water. I built this company. I made you rich. And you dare doubt me now? Silence followed, but it was not loyalty. It was fear. Fear of him and fear of what would happen if they stayed tied to his sinking ship. The leaks multiply. Clara Monroe's articles gained traction not only in New York, but around the globe. Leaked documents painted a damning picture. Offshore accounts, bribes to foreign ministers, evidence of intellectual theft. What began as whispers about Daniel Carter's downfall now stretched into a web of corruption spanning continents. International outlets picked up the story. The BBC, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, all ran features on the Harrington scandal. For the first time, Victor Harrington was not seen as a titan of industry, but as a symbol of unchecked greed. Emily the symbol. For Emily, the attention was overwhelming. Cameras followed her every step. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse whenever she appeared. She had become something larger than herself, the face of resistance against corruption. In rallies across the city, protesters held up signs. Truth matters. Justice for Carter. No one is untouchable. Emily stood on makeshift stages, her voice amplified through megaphones. I am just one woman, she told them, but this fight isn't mine alone. It belongs to every person who has been silenced by money and power. The cheers thundered. She felt strength ripple through her, not because she was fearless, but because fear no longer ruled her. Victor's isolation. In his penthouse, Victor poured another drink, though the taste of scotch no longer comforted him. His phone buzzed constantly with bad news. Cancelled contracts, subpoenas, investors withdrawing. Calls he once commanded now went unanswered. Politicians who had once praised him now distanced themselves, denouncing corruption with carefully scripted statements. Even his most loyal advisor hesitated before entering the room, as though Victor's rage might devour him too. Victor paced like a caged lion. "They've turned her into a saint," he muttered. "A waitress. Do they not see what she is?" But the truth gnawed at him. It wasn't Emily's background that made her dangerous. It was her unyielding refusal to be silenced. Emily's doubts. Yet even as crowds cheered, Emily struggled in the quiet hours. Fame was a double-edged sword. Strangers adored her, but others sent vile threats. Death notes slipped under her door. Messages warned her to quit while you're alive. One night, exhausted, she confided in Clara. "I don't know if I can carry this. I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted the truth." Clara placed a hand on hers. "That's why people believe you. Because you're not chasing glory. You're chasing justice, and that's stronger than any empire." Emily nodded, though the weight remained heavy. Still, she refused to let Victor's fear tactics win. The boardroom cracks further. At the next board meeting, the unthinkable happened. Whispers of replacing Victor surfaced. "We can't survive this with him at the helm," one executive murmured. "He's poison," another agreed. Though no one said it aloud, the truth was clear. Victor Harrington was no longer the company's greatest asset. He was its greatest liability. Victor stormed out, fury boiling. His own kingdom was plotting treason. The tide turns. News outlets buzzed with a single refrain: "The tide is turning." Emily's courage had ignited something larger. Employees of Harrington Enterprises began leaking documents anonymously, unwilling to go down with their leader. Regulators announced investigations. Shareholders filed lawsuits. Victor's empire, once unshakable, now trembled on every front. Victor's resolve. But Victor Harrington was not a man who surrendered. As the city turned against him, as his company betrayed him, he stood at the window of his penthouse, staring at the skyline. "They think they can strip me of power," he whispered. "They think a girl with nothing can destroy me. No, if I am to fall, I will bring her down with me." The glass in his hand trembled, then shattered in his grip, blood dripping onto the marble floor. He did not flinch. For Emily Carter, victory had never felt closer. But for Victor Harrington, desperation had never burned hotter, and desperate men are the most dangerous of all. Victor Harrington had survived decades in the jungle of high finance because he knew one rule better than anyone. Everyone has a weakness. Money, secrets, shame, something always cracked the armor. And if Emily Carter refused to break under lawsuits, smears, and fear, then Victor would dig until he found the chink in her soul. The private investigator. Late one night, Victor sat in his penthouse study, cigar smoke curling in the air. Across from him sat a man with sharp eyes and a face weathered by shadows. Martin Crowe, a private investigator known for his discretion and ruthlessness. Victor slid a folder across the desk. Emily's photo stared up from the cover her at the protest, fist raised, her name scrawled beneath. "Find me everything," Victor ordered. "Every debt, every fight, every skeleton. Friends, lovers, family. I want her destroyed." Crowe's smile was thin. "Everyone hides something. I'll find hers." The digging begins. Within days, Crowe's network reached into Emily's past. Old employers were contacted, pressured to reveal incidents. Former classmates were paid for stories, true or not. Neighbors were asked leading questions, their words twisted into poison. Reports piled onto Victor's desk. Minor arguments, late rent notices, a failed college semester when her father died. Nothing criminal, but enough to paint her as unstable if framed correctly. Victor skimmed the files with satisfaction. "We don't need truth, we need doubt." The family angle. Then Crowe uncovered something more delicate. Emily's mother. Long estranged, she lived quietly in another state. Their relationship had fractured years ago after Daniel Carter's downfall. The pain had been too much. Distance had become survival. Crowe smirked as he reported it. "Family divides make for good headlines. If we can drag her mother out, twist the narrative, it'll look like Emily's just a bitter daughter spinning fantasies." Victor's eyes gleamed. "Perfect. Exploit it." Emily feels the net tighten. Emily sensed it before she saw it. Strangers lingered near her apartment. A man in a grey coat seemed to follow her from the subway. The same number kept calling, never leaving a message. One evening, Clara burst into her apartment with a newspaper. The headline blared, "Emily Carter, troubled past, broken family." Below, photographs of her mother filled the page, alongside quotes taken out of context, suggesting Emily was dramatic and obsessed with revenge. "He has the takes of the dairy." Emily's chest tightened. She hadn't spoken to her mother in years, and now their broken relationship was weaponized against her. "They're trying to turn the world against me," she whispered. Clara gritted her teeth. "No, they're afraid of you. This means you're close to breaking him." "No." The night visit. One night, Emily returned home to find her apartment door ajar. She froze. Heart pounding, she pushed it open slowly. Inside, nothing seemed stolen. But on her table lay a single object, a framed photograph of her father, smashed, glass shattered, the picture bent. Her knees went weak. Someone had been here. Someone wanted her to know they could reach her any time. She sank into a chair, trembling. Fear clawed at her throat, but beneath it burned something stronger, rage. "They won't scare me off," she whispered into the empty room. Not this time. Victor's public play. Even as shadows tightened around Emily, Victor made his move in the daylight. His PR team launched a polished campaign. Harrington Enterprises, a legacy of integrity. Glossy ads filled television screens, praising his philanthropy, his commitment to innovation. Victor himself gave a rare interview. Sitting in his penthouse, he spoke smoothly to the cameras. "I sympathize with Miss Carter's grief," he said, voice dripping with false warmth. "But grief can twist perception. I am not the villain here. I have dedicated my life to building opportunities for others." Some viewers believed him, others scoffed. But the message was clear. He would not go down quietly. Emily strikes back. Clara encouraged Emily to respond. Together, they held a press conference. Standing before flashing cameras, Emily raised the shattered photograph of her father. Her voice trembled but did not falter. "Someone broke into my home and left this," she said. "They want me to be afraid, but I won't stop, because this isn't just about me. It's about every family crushed by greed, every dream stolen by corruption. My father deserves justice, and I won't rest until he has it." The crowd erupted in applause. The image of Emily holding the broken photo spread like wildfire. If Victor wanted to smear her, he had only made her stronger. Victor's boiling rage. When Victor saw the press conference on his television, he hurled a glass against the wall. "She turned it against me," he roared. His advisor spoke cautiously. "Sir, every attack only fuels her. Perhaps it's time to consider—" "Silence," Victor snapped. "I don't care what it takes. She will not destroy me. If the past must be buried deeper, then I'll bury her with it." His words hung heavy in the room. Even his closest aides exchanged uneasy glances. They knew Victor Harrington was no longer merely defending his empire. He was descending into obsession. The hunt for Emily's weakness had begun, but in digging for cracks, Victor only revealed his own. The more he clawed at her life, the more the world began to see not a waitress out of her depth, but a woman refusing to bend. And the more Victor raged, the closer his empire crept toward collapse. Empires don't crumble overnight. They crack first, hairline fractures invisible to most, until suddenly the whole structure caves in. For Harrington Enterprises, the fractures were spreading faster than Victor could plaster them over. The government knocks. On a cold Monday morning, Victor stormed into his office to find a stack of envelopes waiting on his desk. Each bore the seal of a different federal agency. SEC, demanding records of foreign transactions. DOJ, opening a corruption inquiry. FTC, questioning monopolistic practices. His hands trembled as he ripped the letters open. Regulators had circled before, but always he had paid them off, silenced them with influence. Now, their tone was different, emboldened, relentless. The timing was no accident. Emily's accusations had given them cover, and his enemies, long, silent, smelled blood in the water. The board splits. That afternoon, Victor faced his board. Gone were the nods of loyalty. Instead, anxious eyes darted across the room. A director spoke first. "Victor, we can't shield you anymore. The investigations, the protests, the stock is in freefall." Another chimed in. "We have to consider leadership change for the survival of the company." Victor's fists tightened around the table's edge. "You dare betray me after all I've built?" The room went quiet. One man finally whispered, "You built it on lies." Everyone— Victor slammed the table so hard a glass toppled. "Get out, all of you. I don't need cowards." They filed out in silence, leaving Victor alone, raging in the hollow of his collapsing empire. Emily and Clara dig deeper. Meanwhile, in Clara Monroe's cramped office, Emily sifted through boxes of old records, yellowed newspapers, business filings, forgotten patents, all fragments of Daniel Carter's story. Hours turned to days. Emily's eyes blurred, her hands ink-stained, but she refused to stop. Somewhere in this sea of paper lay the proof her father had been robbed. Then Clara gasped. "Emily, look at this. The official leavening for the 7-7. And Reveline with the Defeged Orijans, the Nota de 7 Residi." She held up a faded contract, stamped and signed. At first glance it looked ordinary, but attached was a memo, an internal Harrington Enterprises note. It detailed a buyout negotiation between Victor and Daniel Carter. Buried in the language was clear evidence. Victor had leveraged stolen information to force Daniel into surrendering his patents. It was blackmail, dressed in corporate legality. Emily's breath caught. She traced her father's signature on the page. It wasn't just a contract, it was a smoking gun. Tears welled in her eyes. He never wanted to give up. He was cornered. Clara nodded grimly. "This could tie Harrington directly to your father's destruction. With this, we might finally prove everything." The rally, news of the government investigations, electrified the public. Crowds gathered outside Harrington Enterprises, chanting, waving signs. "Justice for Carter. Break the billionaire. No more silence." Emily stood at one rally, clutching the contract they had found. When she spoke, her voice shook the air. "This paper is more than ink. It is proof that Victor Harrington destroyed my father, not by accident, but by design. And if he could do it to Daniel Carter, he could do it to anyone. That is why we must not stop." The crowd erupted, their cheers echoing down the streets. Emily felt their energy course through her like fire. Victor in freefall. In his penthouse, Victor hurled the day's newspaper across the room. The headline screamed, "Leaked Contract, Ties Harrington to Carter Scandal." His reflection in the window looked hollow, haunted. For decades, he had believed himself untouchable. Now strangers in the street spat his name like a curse. He called his lawyer, voice ragged. "How bad is it?" The lawyer hesitated. "Bad. If that contract holds, it's not just civil liability, it's criminal." Victor's hand shook as he poured another drink. His empire, once a fortress, was turning into quicksand beneath him. Emily's private struggle. That night, Emily sat alone in her apartment, the contract spread before her. She traced her father's signature again and again, as though touching it could bring him back. For years, she had carried his absence like a wound. Now she carried his proof like a weapon. But with it came weight. This was no longer just about her grief. It was about justice for every life Victor had ruined. The responsibility felt crushing, but then she whispered into the quiet, "I'm not afraid of him anymore." And for the first time, she believed it. The desperate billionaire. Meanwhile, Victor stared out over Manhattan, the city lights glittering like stars. Once, they had seemed like jewels in his crown. Now they mocked him. He muttered to himself, voice thick with scotch, "If they want war, I'll give them war." His shadow loomed against the glass. The mask of the billionaire philanthropist was gone. In its place stood a man cornered, desperate, and dangerous. And desperate men, Victor knew, could do anything. The empire was cracking, the government was circling, the truth was surfacing. Emily had found her father's voice in ink and paper, and the world had begun to listen. But the closer the walls closed around Victor Harrington, the more vicious his claws would become. The storm had only just begun. Victor Harrington had spent his life mastering control of markets, of men, of the very narrative that shaped his empire. But now, control was slipping like sand through his fingers. The government investigations tightened daily. Protests outside his headquarters grew louder, and Emily Carter, a waitress with nothing but the truth and a few scraps of paper, was tearing at the foundation of his fortune. If the walls were closing in, then Victor would smash them down before they crushed him. The legal counterattack. At dawn, Victor summoned his lawyers. The conference table gleamed under cold light, covered in binders and laptops. "We're not defending anymore," Victor barked. "We're attacking." His lead attorney adjusted his glasses. "What angle do you propose?" "Character assassination," Victor snarled. "If we can't bury her with money, we bury her with doubt. File emergency motions claiming fraud. Push for perjury. Claim she doctored evidence." The lawyer hesitated. "It's risky. If the court sees through it." "They won't," Victor snapped. I've bent courts before. Reluctantly, the team began drafting a fresh wave of lawsuits. The headlines soon followed. Harrington alleges forgery in Carter case. New legal twist in Billionaire showdown. Victor smirked at the coverage. The strategy wasn't about winning in court, it was about muddying the waters. If he could convince the world the evidence was tainted, maybe the tide would turn. The hidden meeting. But lawsuits alone weren't enough. That night, Victor met with Martin Crowe, his private investigator, in a dimly lit bar. Legal won't stop her, Victor said, swirling his glass. We need something final, something that takes her off the board entirely. Crowe's expression was unreadable. Final as in permanent. Victor's eyes were steel. Accidents happen, and accidents don't testify. Crowe leaned back, weighing the risk. Dangerous move, if it traces back to you. It won't, Victor cut him off. Make it look natural. Chaos in a protest. A car gone out of control. Something no one can pin to me. Crowe nodded slowly. I'll see what can be arranged. Victor's chest swelled with grim satisfaction. He had clawed his way out of darker corners before. He would do it again. Emily under fire. Meanwhile, Emily sat with Clara in the newsroom, staring at the fresh headlines about forgery. They're saying I faked it, Emily whispered, hands shaking. Clara's voice was sharp. Of course they are. It's what men like him do, turn the accuser into the villain. But don't worry. The contract is real. We'll prove it. Emily pressed her palms to her temples. The weight of fame and fury pressed harder than ever. For every message of support, 10 more accused her of lies. Death threats multiplied. But then she thought of the rally, of the thousands chanting her name. They weren't chanting for a waitress. They were chanting for justice. She straightened, her voice firmer. He's afraid. That's why he's trying this. And if he's afraid, we're winning. The protest. Days later, Emily stood before another massive crowd outside Harrington Enterprises. Banners waved. Chants thundered. She raised the contract high. They say this is fake, but I tell you now it is real. My father's signature is here. Harrington's betrayal is here. And no smear, no lawsuit, no threat will erase it. The crowd roared. Reporters jostled to capture the moment. From a rooftop across the street, Martin Crowe watched through binoculars. His phone buzzed. Victor's voice hissed on the line. Do it. His had be definite size the state, and Crowe's finger hovered over the signal button. Below, the protest surged, Emily at its heart. But something in her defiance made even Crowe pause. She was no longer just a target. She was a movement. For a moment, hesitation clouded him. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. The timing wasn't right. Not yet. Victor's growing desperation. When Crowe reported the delay, Victor exploded. You had one job, he roared, smashing a lamp against the wall. Crowe remained calm. A sloppy job would backfire. Too many cameras, too many eyes. We wait for the right moment. Victor's breath came in ragged bursts. His empire was crumbling, his enemies circling, and still Emily Carter refused to break. Find the moment, he growled, and end her. Emily's private resolve. That night, Emily returned home to find a letter slipped under her door. No signature, just 4 words scrawled in block letters. You will be next. She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching the note. Fear gnawed at her, but she refused to let it win. She thought of her father, of the contract, of the thousands who had placed their hope in her. She whispered into the quiet, I won't run. Not now. Not ever. Her hands shook, but her spirit burned. Victor Harrington was preparing his last gambit. Emily Carter was standing her ground. The storm between them was reaching its peak, and soon, one of them would break. The marble steps of the New York courthouse had seen countless cases, frauds, scandals, crimes that defined eras. But on this brisk winter morning, all eyes turned toward one case. Harrington versus Carter. Camera crews crowded the entrance. Protesters lined the sidewalks, their chants echoing off stone walls. Supporters held signs, Justice for Carter, no one is untouchable. Others, hired by Harrington's team, waved placards declaring, Liar, fake evidence. In the middle of the chaos, Emily Carter walked up the steps. She wore no expensive suit, only a simple navy dress. Her hands trembled, but her chin lifted high. The world wasn't seeing a waitress anymore. They were seeing a fighter. Opening salvos. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. Journalists filled the benches. Every cough, every shuffle of paper seemed magnified. Victor Harrington sat at the defense table, his tailored suit immaculate, silver hair perfectly combed, yet his eyes betrayed him bloodshot. restless. He looked less like a titan, more like a man cornered. The prosecution began. Clara Monroe, now serving as a key witness, presented the contract, the smoking gun tying Harrington directly to Daniel Carter's downfall. She explained the memo, the stolen patents, the coercion. Her words painted a picture of betrayal too sharp to ignore. Victor's attorney shot up, voice dripping with disdain. Forgery! This is a fabrication. A waitress and a sensationalist journalist concocting lies to bring down a respected man. But the judge silenced him with a glare. We will hear the evidence. Havings of Marling, he have not of the proof then been sieve they was of sponses. He having long ducked to life their way. Emily on the stand. When Emily took the stand, the room hushed. She held the contract gently, almost reverently. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she spoke. This isn't just paper. It's my father's signature, his dream, his company, his life. He didn't lose it. It was stolen from him. And Victor Harrington was the thief. Victor leaned back in his chair, smirking. When it was his lawyer's turn, the questions came sharp, designed to shred her composure. Miss Carter, isn't it true you've struggled financially for years? Yes. Isn't it true you hated Victor Harrington for your family's misfortune? Yes. How tursting the glings of the first of glings the maladies. Vermeisting the looters, and the fast of this, and the glings of the maladies of life. How talents of the glings of the maladies of the looters, as the glings of the nines of the claws. How to vest and down, have a melodies of the glings of the blings of the claws, has the glings of the claws, and the blings of the claws. Then how convenient that suddenly you find this contract. How can we trust you didn't forge it for revenge? Emily's jaw tightened. She looked at the jury, not the lawyer. Because lies don't keep you awake at night. Lies don't haunt you for years. The truth does, and I have lived with this truth since the day my father died. A ripple of emotion swept through the courtroom. Even the judge's gaze softened. Victor takes the stand. When Victor rose to testify, the atmosphere shifted. His voice was smooth, practiced, a performance honed over decades. I sympathize with Miss Carter, he began. Losing a father is tragic, but grief twists memory. She has built a fantasy, and in doing so, she drags my name through the mud. He spread his hands, as if pleading. Look at me. Do I look like a killer? A thief? I have built jobs, funded charities, changed lives. Why would I destroy a man like Daniel Carter? For a moment, some in the audience wavered. The old charm was still there. But then the prosecution dropped their bombshell, newly uncovered emails from Harrington's own staff, leaked by whistleblowers. In them, Victor himself discussed Carter innovations, describing Daniel as naive and the patents as ripe for the taking. Gasps filled the courtroom. Victor's mask slipped. His eyes blazed with fury. This is illegal, he roared. Stolen evidence, you can't use this. The judge's gavel slammed down. Order, Mr. Harrington, control yourself. But the damage was done. The jury had seen the truth. The standoff. As proceedings paused for recess, Emily and Victor crossed paths in the corridor. For a moment, the chaos of cameras and lawyers faded. It was just the billionaire and the waitress, face to face. Victor leaned in, voice low and venomous. Enjoy this while it lasts. You think they'll protect you. They'll chew you up and spit you out. I will bury you, Emily Carter. Emily met his gaze, steady. You already tried, and I'm still standing. For the first time, Victor faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. Emily saw it. Beneath the rage, there was fear, the turning tide. By afternoon, the media had already declared it. Emails, expose Harrington lies. The public, once divided, leaned decisively toward Emily. Crowds outside the courthouse swelled, chanting louder than ever. Inside, Victor slumped in his chair. His lawyers whispered frantically, but he no longer listened. The walls he had built for decades were collapsing, brick by brick, under the weight of truth. Emily's silent prayer. That night, Emily sat in her apartment, exhaustion washing over her. She clutched her father's photograph, whispering, "It's working, Dad. They see him now. They finally see." Tears streamed down her face, but they were not tears of despair. They were of release. The battle wasn't over. But the tide had turned. Victor Harrington had built his empire on arrogance and intimidation, but in the courtroom, stripped of control, he was just a man cornered by his own lies. And Emily Carter, once a nameless waitress, was now the voice that refused to be silenced. The courtroom had turned against Victor Harrington. The jury's eyes were colder now, sharper. The leaked emails painted him not as a visionary, but as a predator. Every day of testimony chipped away at the myth of the untouchable billionaire. But Victor Harrington was not a man who accepted defeat, not in business, not in court, not in life. If the legal system was closing in, then he would make his own rules. The secret meeting. In a dim warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Victor met with Martin Crowe again. The private investigator had always been comfortable in shadows, but tonight, even he seemed uneasy. Victor's voice was low, urgent. "I gave you time. Now I want results. Emily Carter cannot be alive when the verdict is read." Crowe hesitated. "The city is crawling with press, security. If something happens to her now, it will point straight back at you." Victor slammed his hand against a crate, rattling it. "Then make it look like chaos. A mugging gone wrong. A protest turned violent. I don't care how, just enter." Crowe studied him for a long moment. "You're not thinking clearly, Victor. This isn't strategy anymore. It's desperation." Victor leaned in, his eyes burning. "Desperation built this empire. Desperation will save it. Do it." Crowe finally nodded, though unease lingered in his eyes. Emily's growing resolve. Emily, unaware of the plot forming in the shadows, prepared for another day in court. She tied her hair back in the mirror, her hands steady. Clara sat nearby, flipping through notes. Tomorrow's testimony is the killer blow. Once the forensic accountants confirm the money trails, Harrington's done. Emily nodded. She had heard it before, but this time it felt real. The mountain was crumbling, yet at night, fear still crept in. Every shadow outside her window felt too long. Every unknown call felt like a threat. She pressed her father's photo to her chest. "Just a little longer, Dad. We're almost there." The ambush. The next evening, after court adjourned, Emily walked with Clara toward Clara's car. The crowd outside the courthouse had thinned, rain slicking the pavement. From the corner of her eye, Emily noticed a man lingering in the alley, broad shoulders, cap pulled low. Her stomach tightened. Suddenly, footsteps pounded behind them. Two men rushed forward. One grabbed Clara's bag, yanking hard. The other lunged toward Emily. She gasped, struggling, heart hammering. This wasn't a robbery, it was too deliberate, too vicious. Before panic could consume her, a group of protesters rounded the corner. "Emily!" one shouted. The attackers froze, then bolted into the rain. Emily collapsed against the car, shaking. Clara wrapped an arm around her. "That wasn't random," Clara whispered. "That was a warning." Emily's breath came in ragged bursts, but fire burned in her eyes. "Then let it be. I'm not backing down." Victor's rage. When Crowe reported the failure, Victor erupted. Two men against a waitress, and they still couldn't finish it. He hurled a glass against the wall, shards scattering. Crowe's tone was flat. The crowd showed up. "Too much noise. Next time we need precision." Victor gripped the edge of his desk, trembling with fury. "No, there won't be a next time. I want her gone before she destroys me completely. Do whatever it takes." For a long moment, Crowe said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. The public strikes back. News of the attempted ambush spread fast. Photos of Emily clutching Clara's arm, eyes wide with shock, flooded social media. The narrative shifted again. No longer was she just a whistleblower, she was a survivor of targeted violence. The public's outrage deepened. Protest crowds doubled, chanting louder, "Protect Emily. Arrest Harrington." No more silence. Journalists pressed police for answers. Officials squirmed under the spotlight. For the first time, whispers of criminal charges against Victor became public. Victor had wanted Emily silenced. Instead, his empire bled faster. Emily's quiet moment. That night, Emily sat by her window, watching the city lights blur in the rain. She felt the tremor in her hands, the echo of the struggle still pulsing through her veins. But beneath the fear was something unshakable. Each attack, each smear, each threat had only proven her father's truth. And if Victor Harrington thought she would run, he hadn't understood her at all. She whispered into the night, her voice steady. "You won't win, Victor, not this time." Victor Harrington's gambit had failed, but in his desperation, he was willing to push further, darker than ever before. The verdict was days away. And as the city braced for the outcome, the battle between the billionaire and the waitress teetered on the edge of life and death. The courthouse had never been louder. Protesters filled the plaza, their chants echoing through stone pillars. "Justice for Carter. No one is untouchable." Inside, tension coiled like a spring. Reporters jostled for seats, cameras flashed, and whispers spread. Today would be decisive. Victor Harrington entered first, his once proud stride faltering. His tailored suit was flawless, but his face betrayed him, dark circles under his eyes, a twitch in his jaw. He looked less like a titan and more like a man watching his kingdom burn. Emily followed minutes later. She wore the same navy dress as before, unadorned, but her presence carried weight. The crowd outside had begun calling her the voice of the voiceless. She wasn't just Daniel Carter's daughter anymore. She was a symbol. The evidence unveiled. The prosecution called its final expert, a forensic accountant, a bespectacled man, calm and precise, who laid out years of financial records like puzzle pieces on a screen. Bank transfers, shell companies, offshore accounts. Each thread traced back to one place, Victor Harrington. The accountant spoke methodically. These funds, totaling $84 million, can be directly linked to the acquisition and collapse of Carter Innovations. The timing aligns with stolen patents. The money trail is clear. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jurors scribbled notes furiously. Victor's lawyer objected, voice strained. Speculative connections. Overruled, the judge snapped. The numbers didn't lie. They glowed on the screen, damning and undeniable. Victor's breaking point. Victor gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white, sweat beaded on his forehead. For decades he had bent truth to his will, but here, under fluorescent lights and sworn oaths, truth bent him. When the prosecution replayed one of his leaked emails, his own words describing Daniel Carter as ripe for the taking, something in Victor snapped. He slammed his fist on the table. This is a circus, a conspiracy against me. I made this city what it is. The judge's gavel thundered. Mr. Harrington, control yourself or I will hold you in contempt. But the damage was done. The jury had seen it. Not a visionary, but a tyrant, unraveling. Emily holds her ground. During recess, Emily sat quietly in the corridor, her hands clasped around her father's photograph. Clara placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You've already won, Clara whispered. Everyone can see it now. Emily shook her head softly. It's not about winning. It's about truth. For Dad, and for everyone else he crushed. Her voice was steady, even as her eyes shimmered. She knew the verdict was close. She also knew Victor was more dangerous than ever, cornered like a wounded animal. The world watches. Outside, television networks broadcast live updates. Commentators dissected every detail. Stock tickers showed Harrington Enterprises plummeting in real time. One anchor summarized it best. What we are witnessing is not just the fall of a billionaire. It is the unmasking of a man who believed himself untouchable, brought low by the courage of a daughter. Crowds around the world tuned in. In cafes, offices, and homes, people stopped what they were doing to watch. Emily Carter's battle had become a global reckoning. Victor's final plea. When Victor returned to the stand, he tried to recover the mask. His voice softened, his hands spread in feigned sincerity. Yes, mistakes were made, but I never intended harm. I admired Daniel Carter. I respected him. My company has provided thousands of jobs, billions in growth. Are we to punish success because of envy? For a moment, silence followed. But then the prosecution rose, holding the contract and the financial records high. Success built on theft is not success. It is corruption, and corruption has no place in justice. The jury nodded, their eyes hard. Victor's performance had failed. Emily's quiet victory. As the session closed, Emily stepped outside into the sea of cameras and chants. The air was electric. Strangers shouted her name, some with tears in their eyes. She raised the contract once more, her voice carrying across the plaza. This fight was never about me. It was about truth. And no matter how powerful the lies, truth will always outlast them. So, he had gone out. The crowd erupted. For the first time, Emily felt not just relief, but freedom. Victor alone. That night, Victor sat in his penthouse, the city sprawling beneath him. Once, the lights had felt like jewels in his crown. Now, they mocked him, each one a reminder of the empire slipping through his grasp. He poured another drink, but it tasted like ash. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Lawyers, board members, journalists. He ignored them all. For the first time in decades, Victor Harrington was truly alone. The courtroom had revealed the truth. The empire was crumbling. The public had chosen sides. All that remained was the verdict, and Victor's final descent. The air inside the courthouse was heavy, charged like the moments before a thunderstorm. Reporters sat poised with pens, cameras ready to flash. Protesters outside roared so loudly their chants vibrated through the marble walls. Emily Carter sat at the plaintiff's table, hands clasped tightly around her father's photograph. Clara whispered beside her, "This is it." Across the aisle, Victor Harrington leaned back in his chair. His silver hair was immaculate, his suit tailored to perfection, but the confidence that had once dripped from his every gesture was gone. His fingers tapped nervously against the polished wood, betraying the storm beneath the mask. The jury returns. After hours of deliberation, the jury filed back into the box. 12 ordinary citizens, carrying the weight of justice. The foreman stood, a folded slip of paper in his hand. The judge's voice boomed. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor." Emily's breath caught. Her heart thundered in her ears. "Guilty." The foreman cleared his throat. "On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. On the charge of corporate corruption, guilty." He's sevened. We breathed. The words echoed like bells tolling across the chamber. Gasps rippled. Reporters scribbled furiously. Emily's knees weakened, but she held herself upright. Tears blurred her vision as the weight of years lifted. She whispered under her breath, "We did it, Dad." Across from her, Victor's face twisted. He shot up, slamming his hands on the table. "This is madness. I am Victor Harrington. You can't do this to me." The judge's gavel thundered. "Order, Mr. Harrington. Sit down." But Victor's mask had shattered. The jury saw it. The world saw it. Not a titan, but a man exposed. The sentencing date. The judge announced sentencing would follow in weeks, but the damage was already done. Victor would lose everything, his company, his fortune, his freedom. Emily, trembling, rose from her chair. Cameras flashed as she stepped into the hallway, greeted by a sea of reporters. "Miss Carter, how do you feel? Do you believe justice has been served? What will you do now?" She held up her father's photograph, her voice steady despite the tears streaking her cheeks. "This was never about money. It was about truth. My father was silenced, but today, justice spoke for him." The crowd erupted in cheers. Victor's rage. Back in the courtroom, Victor slumped into his chair, his empire collapsing in his mind's eye. Board members would flee. Investors would vanish. Politicians who once toasted him would spit his name like poison. He muttered to himself, trembling. "They'll regret this. Every one of them. Especially her." Even in defeat, his obsession with Emily burned like acid. The world reacts. News outlets broke into regular programming with the headline, "Victor Harrington, found guilty." Crowds outside the courthouse celebrated. Strangers hugged. Chants of "Justice for Carter" filled the streets. Around the world, people watched in awe. Commentators called it the trial of the decade. Activists hailed Emily as a hero. Hashtags surged. Number verdict for Carter. Number no one untouchable. For once the story wasn't about a billionaire's power. It was about his fall. Emily's quiet moment. That night, Emily returned home to her small apartment. Away from the crowds, the cameras, the cheers. She sank into her chair and let the silence wrap around her. She placed her father's photograph on the table, lit a small candle beside it. "We did it, Dad," she whispered again, tears flowing freely now. "They finally know the truth. You can rest, and maybe now, I can too. 7 no so be seized to me a ground. Well so for 17 the Sebier mans, and there is level Sever mans pass of a salant. 7 levels." The neighbor, for the first time in years, the weight on her chest eased. Victor alone. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Victor stood at the window overlooking the city he had once ruled. The lights twinkled below, but they no longer felt like jewels in his crown. They were stars in a sky he no longer owned. He poured a drink, but his hand shook so violently half of it spilled. He muttered, almost to himself, "They think they've beaten me, but I am Victor Harrington. I don't lose." Yet his reflection in the glass told the truth. The age of Victor Harrington was over. The verdict had been spoken. The empire had fallen. And Emily Carter, once just a waitress with 7 words, had brought a giant to his knees. Winter sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps as crowds gathered once more. The trial had ended, but one final chapter remained, the sentencing of Victor Harrington. Reporters clustered shoulder to shoulder. Protesters held fresh signs. Some demanded the maximum penalty. Others simply wanted to see the man who once ruled their city humbled in chains. Emily Carter stood quietly near Clara Monroe, her breath fogging in the cold air. She had attended every hearing, endured every headline. Today would not be different. Today she would see it through. The courtroom. Inside, tension simmered. The judge entered, robes flowing, his gavel echoing across marble walls. "Victor Harrington," he intoned, "you have been found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and corporate corruption. Today, this court delivers its sentence." Victor stood at the defense table, his once impeccable posture sagging. His lawyers flanked him, but even they seemed resigned. "Before sentencing," the judge continued, "the court will hear statements. Emily speaks." The room hushed as Emily rose. She held her father's photograph in her hands, stepping slowly to the front. "My father, Daniel Carter, was a man of integrity," she began, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "He believed in hard work, in building something honest. Harrington destroyed him, not with bullets, but with greed. He stole his company, his dream, and left him broken." Her eyes swept the jury box, then settled on Victor. "For years, I lived in silence, ashamed of what was taken from us. But silence protects the powerful. Speaking out is the only way to honor the truth. Today, I stand not just for my father, but for every family crushed by corruption. I ask this court for justice, not vengeance, but justice." Tears blurred her vision as she stepped back. The gallery erupted in quiet applause, quickly hushed by the bailiff. Victor's last words. The judge turned to Victor. "You may address the court." Victor straightened, eyes flashing with the remnants of arrogance. "I built this city," he declared. "I created wealth, opportunity, progress, and now, because of one bitter woman, I am to be destroyed? This is not justice. This is envy, masquerading as righteousness. History will remember me as a builder, not a thief. So, you've not subscribed to raid. If you will made." But his voice cracked at the edges. The jury saw through him. The world saw through him. The judge's gavel struck. Enough. He was not some the me. As the maving, the sentence. The chamber fell silent. "For your crimes," the judge said, voice steady. "This court sentences you, Victor Harrington, to 25 years in federal prison." Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Protesters outside erupted in cheers as the news spread. Victor's face drained of color. He staggered as marshals stepped forward, clamping cuffs around his wrists. "No!" he roared. "You can't do this. I am Victor Harrington." But the clink of chains silenced him. The titan of finance was led away, no longer a king, but a prisoner. The collapse of an empire. In the weeks that followed, Harrington Enterprises crumbled. Stock prices flatlined. Subsidiaries broke away. Competitors circled like vultures, devouring the remnants. Victor's name was stripped from buildings, foundations, and gala invitations. Politicians who once boasted of his donations now denied ever knowing him. The empire that had taken decades to build fell in months, erased by arrogance and truth. Emily's new path. Emily returned to her modest apartment, but she was no longer the same woman who had once balanced trays in the Everly room. Letters poured in daily, people thanking her for giving them courage, for proving that even the powerless could challenge the mighty. Universities invited her to speak. Non-profits asked her to lead campaigns. Clara encouraged her to write her story, to preserve it in her own words. "You've lit a fire, Emily," she said. "Don't let it go out." Emily often sat by her window at night, staring at the skyline. She no longer saw only loss. She saw possibility. Her father's dream had been stolen, but her voice had given it back, not to him alone, but to the world. Victor behind bars. Meanwhile, in a grey cell far from Manhattan's glittering towers, Victor Harrington sat on a narrow cot. His suit had been replaced by prison uniform, his penthouse by concrete walls. The guards ignored him. The inmates mocked him. For the first time in his life, Victor's wealth meant nothing. He stared at the ceiling, muttering to himself, "They'll regret this. I'll rise again." But his words carried no weight here. The empire was gone. The throne was gone. Only the silence remained. The city moved on, but the lesson lingered. No man, no matter how powerful, is untouchable. And Emily Carter, once silenced, had become the voice of a generation. Spring arrived in New York like a long-awaited breath. The snow had melted, the air carried warmth again, and the city, restless as ever, moved forward. But for Emily Carter, life would never be the same. The first step forward. Months had passed since Victor Harrington was led away in chains. His empire lay in ruins, his name spoken only with contempt. The world had moved on, but Emily remained etched in its memory, not as a waitress, not even as a plaintiff, but as the young woman who had brought a billionaire to justice. Yet fame was never her goal. Emily still lived simply, still rode the subway, still brewed her own morning coffee. But wherever she went, strangers stopped her. Some clasped her hand with gratitude, others whispered, "You gave us hope." Each word reminded her why she had fought. The book. Clara Monroe had insisted she write her story. Not for fame, Clara said, but for truth. If you don't tell it, someone else will twist it. So Emily wrote. Late nights at her kitchen table, she poured out everything. Her father's dreams, his downfall, the years of silence. The night she spoke 7 words that changed everything. She wrote of fear, of threats, of courtroom battles. When the manuscript was finished, Clara placed a hand on it. This isn't just your story, Emily. It's a beacon. The book, 7 words, became an international bestseller. Readers devoured it not for scandal, but for the reminder that truth, though fragile, could topple giants. The foundation. With proceeds from the book and donations from supporters, Emily founded the Daniel Carter Foundation. Its mission, to support entrepreneurs whose ideas might otherwise be crushed by corporate greed. On the day of its launch, she stood before a crowd in a modest hall, sunlight streaming through tall windows. This foundation is not about revenge, she told them. It is about renewal. My father believed in dreams, in integrity. This is how I honor him, not by dwelling in the past, but by building a future where others can stand without fear. The audience rose in applause. Emily felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not of sorrow. They were of pride. Victor's shadow. News trickled occasionally from the prison where Victor Harrington lived out his sentence. Reports described him as bitter, defiant, muttering of comebacks that never came. Emily read them with a strange mix of pity and relief. He had once been the monster that haunted her nights. Now, he was just a man in a cage, his empire gone, his name ruined. She no longer feared him. He no longer had that power. A quiet visit. One warm afternoon, Emily visited her father's grave. She carried fresh lilies, placing them gently on the stone. For a long time, she stood in silence. The city buzzed in the distance, but here it was calm. I kept my promise, Dad, she whispered. They know the truth now, and I'll keep speaking it, not just for you, but for everyone who needs to be heard. A soft breeze stirred the trees. Emily closed her eyes, almost feeling his presence beside her, proud and at peace. The new dawn. As she walked back through the cemetery gates, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Emily paused, gazing at the horizon. Her journey had begun as a daughter seeking justice. It had turned her into a fighter, a symbol, a voice. But now, as the world moved forward, she realized she had become something more, a guardian of truth. The battle with Victor Harrington was over, but the fight for justice never truly ended, and Emily Carter was ready for whatever came next. She smiled softly to herself, whispering words she had once feared to speak, now carried with strength. No one is untouchable, has not safe to do, has followed, and with that, she stepped into the future, not as the waitress who defied a billionaire, but as the woman who proved that even the smallest voice could change the world.